Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we are here today with lesson number 45 in our incredible tutorial series where you are learning artificial intelligence on the Jetson Nano. I am going to need you to pour yourself a nice enormous mug of iced coffee, and if you like, you may also have a nice cup of hot coffee. And I need you to get ready to learn some cool new stuff. So let's go ahead and get out our Jetson Nano gear. And as you're getting your gear out, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. Your help and encouragement is keeping these great lessons coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, look down in the description below. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and get ready to learn some cool new stuff. So what are we going to learn today? Well, let's think about what we've learned so far. In this series of lessons, we have been learning about artificial intelligence on the Jetson Nano. And more specifically, what we have been looking at recently is doing facial recognition. Now, facial recognition is not just where you find the faces in the picture, but you figure out whose face is in the box. So you find the faces and then you identify who they are. Now, what's finally starting to happen is we really need to sharpen our Python coding skills. Now, up until this point, I write Python code in a very logical, linear way. And the reason I do that is because it makes it a lot easier for you to understand. Like, let's say we have a task, and that task has 10 different things that you need to do. So you have kind of like line of code 1, line of code 2, on down to 10, and then they all stack up to do the function, to do the thing that you want. And so that's kind of very logical. It's easy to understand, it's easy to learn, it's easy to follow, it's easy to do things on your own. But what finally happens is there are just certain things you can't do using that simple, easy to understand logical program flow. And so, like as an example, I think in the last lesson where we ended up, we were launching 2 different cameras, and when we launched those 2 different cameras, they weren't in sync. One was about a second lag but behind the other one, and we can really see that if we're going to move forward, we're going to have to write better code so that our program is going to perform the way that we want it to. So this is a good time to pause, and we are going to learn 4 things today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the mystery out of it, and I'm going to show you step by step, and you're actually going to understand it. But what we're going to learn today is we're going to learn functions, we're going to learn classes, we're going to learn methods, and we're going to learn threading. Okay, now there's 2 reasons that we're going to do this. One reason is we can start writing more sophisticated code that reaches the performance goals that we have for our program. And number 2, now when you look at other people's Python code, more sophisticated programmers who actually know what they're doing as opposed to me who doesn't really know what I'm doing, when we look at more sophisticated programmers, we can look at their code and we can understand what it is. Because I don't know if you've ever just popped open someone's Python code and it starts having underscore init underscore self this self dot that, and just whoa, it's like, what on earth is this crazy code doing? That is classes. And what I'm going to do today, I'm going to explain to you classes and methods where you're going to understand them. You're going to be able to write your own programs with classes and methods, and when you look at the work that these smart boys are doing, you're going to understand what they're doing. So I think it's time that we take a lesson and sharpen our Python skills. So I need to get out of your way, and I need you to come over here and open up a fresh new Visual Studio Code. I believe that we are working in Face Recognizer folder, so we need to click on that, and we need to add a new program. And it looked like the last one I did was Face Recognizer 7. That would make this program Face Recognizer 8. And then I think I'll call it PYTH, just because we're learning a little bit about Python.py. You guys know that .py is indeed important. We're going to get this out of the way. Okay, I'm going to start really simple, and then I'll take you through as quick as I can, but making sure you understand it, functions, classes, methods, and threading. You probably already understand functions. We probably already work with those a little bit. But let's just start and say that we have a bunch of rectangles and we want to calculate the area of the rectangle. Well, what I could say is like the length of rectangle 1 is 3. The length or the width of rectangle 1 is equal to 5. Again, I don't have coronavirus. It's those darn cleaning ladies and their bleach. They're bleaching everything and it is making me wheezy. Okay, so now what I could say is area 1 is equal to length 1 times width 1, and then I can print area 1. And let's say we had a bunch of different ones just for illustration. I will do 2, so I'm going to take all that copy, and then I'm going to come here and I'm going to paste it. And so then let's say that this one was 6 and 4, and this becomes length 2, width 2, area 2, length 2, width 2, and then print area 2. And let's make it just a little nicer, okay? Even though this is a simple demo program, we just can say area of rectangle 1, okay? And then we'll make it a little easier by copying that. Control C. I really hope that I can write 8 lines of code this early in the morning without making a mistake, but we will see. Control V, and then don't forget the comma. So let's just see. Ooh, how do you like that? How could there be a mistake on line 1? Do you guys see my mistake? I don't think I have a mistake in line 1. I think this is just confused, so I'm going to save this. Sometimes this Visual Studio gets confused and you've just got to kill it and start it again. Okay, here we are. Run Python file in terminal. Okay, now that's a real error there. I didn't put a comma there. All right, this should run. Hopefully you guys caught that. Okay, area of rectangle 1 is 15. Area of rectangle 2, oh, I put the comma in the wrong spot. That's what it was. Area of rectangle 2 is 24. All right, so hopefully that makes perfect sense. And let me get this up here where you can see everything. Okay, so hopefully that makes perfect sense, but you can see it gets tedious if you keep doing the same calculation over and over. And so let's write a function, okay? And let's call this function calculate, okay? Now you could call it area, but you'll see in a minute why I didn't call it rectangle area, because I'm going to add a few more things to the function later. And so I need to pass in parameters. What do I need? Well, I need the width of the rectangle and the length of the rectangle. And so what you can see is you define a function with the keyword def, you put a space and then the name of the function, and then all the lines of code underneath it that are indented, those are going to be the steps of that function. So what am I going to say? Well, I'm going to say area is equal to W times L, and then the next step is print area. Okay, and so now the way I would do it, I would come down here. Well, I've defined length 1 and width 1, but now what I would do is I would call the function rectangular calculate. Okay, I got to pass it what? W1 and L1. Okay, and then I'm going to call it again here. Rectangle calculate, and then I am going to call it W2 and L2, like that. Okay, so then when it sees this line of code, it's going to hop up here and do this, and then it's going to come back to this step, and then it's going to hop up here and do this. So you see, I can put my calculation up here, and then the code is a lot clearer. I define the parameters, and then I do the function. I define the parameters and I do the function. So let's see if this works. Oh, and let's say rectangle area is, okay, area. And why did it not like that? That sure looks, oh, no comma. Man, I am really messing up my commas, huh? Run Python file in terminal. Okay, rectangle area is 15 and then rectangle area is 24. Now what you see is that this simplest function, I've kind of got it defined one way. I send the stuff up to the function and then the function does everything and there's nothing that comes back. Well, really what you really want to do is you don't want to do everything in the function. You want to do a calculation and then you want to pass something back. So really what we would want to do is we would want to come down here and we would want to do the printing down here, and I'll go back and again call this rectangle area rectangle 1 area, and then I am going to also put it here rectangle 2 area. All right, now what I want you to see is I need to get this parameter area back down here to the main program. And I don't want to be printing up here in the function. So what do I need? I need to return what I calculate. So I'm going to return what? Area. And so the program now has a value area and it's going to jump back down here. So in effect, the way you should look at this is that function is passing the ball back to the main program, and that ball is area. Well, if the function's going to pass it, the program had better what? Catch it. So it's going to return it, and so I better put it somewhere. So I'm going to say area 1 equals. So this rectangular calculate is going to come back with a value. It's going to put it in area 1, and then I'm going to print area 1. And then here I'm going to say area 2 is equal to, call the function. Now I will print area 2. All right. So here I've got rectangle 1 area is 15, rectangle 2 area is 24. Hopefully this makes perfect sense. So what I want you to see is you pass the parameters up here inside the parentheses, you pass the parameters to the function, and then you return your values with the return statement. Now let's say I could also calculate here perimeter, so I could say perimeter is equal to 2 times W plus 2 times length. And then what I would want to do is I would want to return perimeter and area. Now the thing that you have to see is you can't do 2 return statements because when it hits return it leaves the function. So what you've got to do is you've got to stack things up inside of with the same return statement. So I'm going to return area. I'm going to return perimeter. Now if I am returning area and perimeter, what I can also do is I need to catch both of them. So area 1 comma perimeter 1. So you see I've got 2 things on the left of the equal sign, which we really haven't done in the past, but it's going to calculate area and it's going to calculate perimeter. If I'm throwing 2 balls, I better catch 2 balls. And the same thing here, area 2 comma perimeter 2. And then what I could do is I could just print area 1 comma perimeter 1, and then I could print area 2 comma perimeter 2, and then rectangle 1 results, just results, and rectangle 1 results. Okay, so let's run this and see if it's going to work. Okay, so the rectangle results are 15 and 16. That would be the area, and that would be the perimeter. And for the second one, the area is 20, and the 24, and the perimeter is 20. Does that make sense? You see? Now, I guess what I could do is I could also just make more and more things. Now, you could have if statements in here where this rectangle calculate did one thing or another based on an additional parameter that you pass. So there's all kinds of different things. But once you hit the return, you're going to leave the function and go back to the main thing. And if you throw a ball, you got to catch it. So hopefully this makes sense. This is like a really, really simple example, but it's very powerful. Now, if we look at the code, it makes sense. It's like, okay, I'm calculating the area and the parameter using this function. I pass it these two parameters and it returns to me these two parameters. So the code starts getting a lot simpler, and you can imagine as your calculations get complicated, it's much easier to just have a function you call that's named something intuitive. So functions are very, very powerful, and they're really easy to understand. Okay, but what we need to do now is we need to go to the next thing, which is more complicated, but I'm going to explain it to you where you will really understand it. So I'm going to say we need to come back over here, and we're going to create our new program. We will stay in Face Recognizer. We will add a new file, and this will be Face Recognizer, and this will be 9. And this will be classes.py. Okay, so we're going to learn how to do a class. All right. Now, we're going to keep thinking about the rectangle. Kind of think of the rectangle, as a box or something like that. And what you can see is that down in the main program, like if I have rectangle 1, I'm having to keep track of the parameters like its length and its width. And then I run up to the function, I do a calculation, and I come back. But the real keeping track of things, the real bookkeeping is being done down in the main program. Well, if I've got 20 rectangles that I'm trying to keep up with, that gets really confusing because maybe I haven't fooled with rectangle 1 in a long time, and I've even forgotten what rectangle 1 was doing. So instead of doing functions, which do a calculation, what we want to do is classes. And a class will keep track of both functions like operations and data or parameters. So think of a class as a kit that you have that will keep track of both the data, both the parameters of your rectangle and the functions. Okay, and so let me just see if I can do like the simplest thing possible. I'm going to define a class, and the class is going to be rectangle. And notice that for what we need to do, you really are not passing anything to the class. I'm just defining this class that's going to be called a rectangle. And now what I can do down here, I can create a rectangle. Like I could say rectangle 1 is equal to what? A rectangle. Okay, so now I am calling that rectangle class, and I am creating an object. You see this rect1, it's not a variable. It's not a parameter. It is an object, a rectangle. Now up here in this rectangle class, I'm going to describe and I'm going to keep track of all the things associated with my object. My object is a rectangle. Well, your object might be a car. What would things that you would want to keep track of with, your car class? Well, maybe the color of the car, maybe the number of seats, maybe you could calculate miles per gallon, but it would be a bunch of functions and it would be a bunch of parameters associated with a particular car. Then if I had 3 cars, I could create 3 car objects, car 1, car 2, and car 3, and then that object would keep track of everything associated with that car. So far I am just creating rectangle, an object rectangle. So rect1 It's going to create a rectangle. It's going to be called rect1, and then it's going to be defined up here. Well, when you create the object one time, it is going to do the init function. So, you know, I'm only going to create rectangle 1 one time. And when I create rectangle 1, what it is going to do is it is going to run the init function. So I have to define it. Define underscore underscore init underscore underscore. Okay. Now, what you're going to have is self, and then what might I pass to it? Well, I might pass color, I might pass width, and I might pass length. Okay. So when I call rectangle now, what I need to do is I need to pass it what? Color. Well, let's just say I don't have to use the same variable, but like C1, and then I have to pass it W1, and then I got to pass it L1. All right. So when you create the object rect1, it comes up here and it does the init function. Now, another thing that you're going to learn, when you put a function inside of a class, you don't call it a function, you call it a method. Okay, so if you hear people talk about methods, it's real simple. It's just a function. You already understand functions. It's just a function that's inside of a class. Okay, so what are we going to do? Now we've got to understand, like I passed it C1, W1, and L1, and that's going to be color, W, and L. Well, what is self? Self is the name of the object. So if I create this object rect1 is equal to rectangle, then when it comes up here, itself is what? Itself is rect1. So just when you see self, what you know is that that's going to be rect1. Well, if I create rect2, then self is going to be rect2. If I create rect3, then self is going to be rect3. So now I can create unique variables for rectangle 1, rectangle 2, rectangle 3 by calling them self dot one thing, self dot something else. You see, so it's a way now that I could have many objects that are using and creating in this class. Well, now I got to put the colon here. Now what I've got to do is I've got to set up variables for this class to use. Well, self dot width is equal to what? Width. And then self dot height is equal to, I messed up. What did I pass it? I passed it W. Okay. And so self dot width is W. Self dot height is H, or is, why did I call that? Width and length. Okay. Let's call it width and length to keep it the same. Length is equal to L. All right. Does that make sense? Okay. And now what I can also say is self dot color is equal to C. All right. So what you got to do in your initialization, you've got to take those parameters that are passed in and you've got to put them into self.variables that can then be used in the rest of your function. So in the rest of my class, I wouldn't want to use color, W, or L. I would want to use self.width, self.length, self.color, and that way you keep track of the difference between rectangle 1, rectangle 2, and rectangle 3. So let's come down here, and we haven't really done anything, but when we say rect1, we create the object rect1 with the class rectangle1. It's going to come up here to rectangle, and then it is going to run this. So now look what I could do, and I guess I got to put it some variables. Okay, so I could say that C1 is equal to red, and then I could say W1 is equal to 3, and then I could say L1 is equal to 4, and then what I could come down here and I could say that print, and I could say what I could say is rectangle 1 is, and then what I could say is self.color. Okay, why can I say self.color? Because it ran it up here and it put something here, but now down here it doesn't know what self is. What do I know? It's rect1 dot color. Okay, and then width, length, comma, and what would I do? Rectangle 1 dot length. Length. Okay, so now let's run that. Name C is not defined. Oh, here I put, let me make this C here. Okay, so C1, which is red, passes into C, and then it becomes self.color. Well, self is rect1, so if I want to access it down here it no longer knows what self is, so I call it rect1.color. And it would sure be easier if I made it like that, wouldn't it? Okay, so let's try that. Okay, rectangle 1 is red with length 4. Boom, you see that? But down here, it doesn't know what self is. You use your object name, rect1. Okay, you use your object name, rect1. What else could I do? I could say self.area is equal to what? Self.width, comma, self, or times self dot length. Okay, and then here what I could do is I could say width area rect2 dot area. Okay, with area 12. You see how that works? All right, now why do we do this self business instead of just saying C, W, and L? Well, imagine that I created 4 objects. Then the C, W, and L would be for whatever the last object was that I called. But you see, like imagine I play with rectangle 1 and then create rectangle 1, play with it, create rectangle 2, play with it, and then I want to go back to rectangle 1. Well, if I wasn't doing this kind of self way of doing things, it would keep overriding the data. But the self sort of keeps track of W1, width and length of rectangle 1, width and length of rectangle 2, so I can create a lot of objects, I can play with them in random order, and it always keeps track of what is what. All right, but really, you don't want to do everything in the init function. You want to create different functions inside of the class. And what do we call those? What do we call them? We call them methods. So, instead of calling them functions, we're going to call them methods. And so, what would be one method? Well, I could have define, and what I could say is I am going to have define area. And then what is area need? Well, area needs self. All right. Now, these things that I've created, they're going to pass on down. So it's going to know down here inside of area, it's going to know self.width, it's going to know self.length and self.color. All I've got to pass to it is self. All right. Now, what do I do? Well, I can say area equal, no! Why can I not call it area? Because then it can't keep track of the area of rect1 versus the area of rect2. So I need to make this what? Self.area, and that's going to be equal to self.width times self.length. length. Okay, and then you know what I could do? I could just leave it like that. All right, and let's just leave it like that, and let's see what would happen. Okay, so what I would do is I would create the rectangle. Okay, I create the rectangle object. All right, now let's see if I just came down and said print rectangle1 dot area. All right, let's say I print rectangle1 dot area. Okay, I get an error. Okay, I get an error. Why do I get an error? Well, when I call rectangle and create the object rect1, it comes up to rectangle and it does what? It does this. So now when I try to print rectangle1 area, that has never been calculated. Okay, so what I would need to do is, after creating the object, then I would need to call what? Rectangle 1 dot area, like that. Okay, and then what I could do, let's see what just happens. That's going to call that, and then it should know what it is. So I've got to call this method. So you see, I can call a method inside of a class by just telling it which object. Rect1's already been calculated. Now, am I having to pass it the parameters? No, it already knows the parameters. Okay, so look at that, 12. Now, do you see the power of this? When I called rect area, I did not have to repass it the parameters because it kept track of it with this self way of doing things. Okay, so rect1 then called this, and then I know what rect1 dot area is. Now, really, that's not a very good way of doing things. You really don't want to start referencing variables that are going on up here. A better way of doing this would be, okay, like if I call area, what should I do? I should return what? Self dot area, like that. Okay, and now when I call it, what I need to say is like my, or I could say area rect1 is equal to rect1 area. Now it's going to call rect1 area, and then it's going to return self dot area, and self dot area is going to be put in here. Okay, so now I would print that like that. Okay, so now let's run this. Okay, oh, I misspelled it here. Okay, rect1, area rect1, and this should be area rect1. Run Python file in terminal. Area rect1. What is this? Area rect1. Uppercase versus lowercase. That was starting to scare me because I'm sure this works, and I was starting to think, do I not know what's going on? 12. Okay, so you see, when I create the object, I pass it C1, W1, and L1. This remembers that rect1 width and rect1 length and rect1 color. Okay, so let's try this. Let's create a second one. Okay, a second object. Okay, so now what I'm going to have is I'm going to have a second color, blue. I'm going to have a second width, a second length, change these to 2. Okay, so I create my first rectangle, and then I create my second rectangle, and then I have all these second parameters. All right, so let's try this. Run Python file in terminal. Okay, I get 12 and 12 because they were the same. Let's make this 7 and 3.2. I wonder if that's going to work, 7 and 3.2. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that worked. Okay, so you see that is working. But now what I want you to see is I've played around with blue, but I can go back to red now. And let's just watch this. Watch this. What I could say is print, and I could say rectangle 1 is, and then what could I call it? I could call it rectangle 1 dot color. So even though I've been playing around with this function with a new rectangle, if I do this, rectangle 1 is red. You see, because I have this is associated with that self. All right. So when I create an object rect1, self becomes rect1. Okay. And then self.width is the same as saying rect1.width. Self.length is rect1.length. And then self.color is rect1.color. Then if I create the second object, rect2, then self becomes rect2.width. Well, the good news is rect1.width is still the same value, because then this is like a different variable. Now I could do other things. Okay, I could say define perimeter. Okay, and define perimeter. All I need is self. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to say self dot perimeter is equal to 2 times self dot width plus 2 times self dot length. All right. And so maybe I'm just interested in the perimeter of rectangle 1. Well, then what I could do down here is I could say perimeter 1 is equal to rect dot, or rect1 dot, and what method do I want to call? Perimeter. Okay, perimeter. And now I don't have to pass it anything, because it already knows the color, the width, and the length. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, rectangle 1 is, rectangle 1 has perimeter, and I need to, yeah, that's going to return, right? Did I return it? I did not return it, so I need to say return self dot perimeter. Okay, and then down here, pair 1 catches that self dot perimeter. All right, and then what I could just do is I could just say perimeter 1, because that's perimeter 1. Run Python file in terminal. Rectangle 1 has a perimeter of 14. Okay, is that right? 6 plus 8 is 14. Okay, and you know what you could even do is you could say, like, let's make it a little fancier. We could say the space, and then we could put rect1 dot color, comma, and then rectangle has perimeter. Okay, let's try that. The red rectangle has perimeter 14. Boom. Okay, guys, if this didn't make perfect sense, go back and watch this again, because man, your life is going to be so much better if you can understand classes. Classes and a function in a class is called a method. When you create an object with a class, like rectangle 1 or rectangle 2, when you create the object, it runs to find.int. And then after you create that object, you can call whichever methods you want, and you can interact with these methods directly. You don't have to interact at this level, or you don't have to pass it parameters. You pass it parameters at the top, and then you can sit and work around. And the nice thing is, if I'm working with rectangle 1, and then I come and I do a whole bunch with rectangle 2, I can go back to rectangle 1 and everything is still in place. It's still organized. So it's sort of like I got a box, rectangle 1, and it's a toolbox that has both numbers and data and functions, and then I've got a second toolbox called rect2. So a class is like a kit that has both functions and data in it, and then every object that you create kind of has its own kit. Does that make sense? I sure hope it does. This is really important. And now when you look at other people's code, you understand this init. That is just what's run the first time that you create an object. When you create the object, this is run, and then these other ones are callable by that name self, whatever you name that object. Okay, I know I'm repeating myself. Go back and watch this a couple of times, but man, understand this and it will take your programming to the whole new level. Okay, let me see if I can back up here a second. And let's see, I think this is where we left off last time. Let me see if I can run this thing. I think in lesson number 44, we were running 2 cameras. Let's see if it is. Hopefully this will run. Okay, now look at the 2 cameras. Okay, let me see if I can point this a little bit better at me. Okay, now watch the 2 cameras. Do you see the problem? The problem is that the PyCam has like a second or 2 of latency, and that's just because the way we did it was I created camera 1, I created camera 2, I read camera 1, and I read camera 2. Well, while I'm reading camera 1, what's happening? Frames are stacking up from camera 1. Okay, so while I'm reading camera 2, it's tied up my processor, and frames are stacking up in the queue on the other camera, and therefore what it ends up with is, while I'm working with this camera over here is falling behind, so your program gets out of sync. So what I need is, instead of having function 1 and function 2, and I call function 1, read camera 1, I call function 2, read camera 2, what I need is, I need both of those reads to be running at the same time. So I need to have functions that are not waiting on each other. Instead of going boom, 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 I need them to go boom, 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 where they're both running. That, my friend, is called threading. Okay, that is called threading. And let's see if we can understand it. Okay, this is the way that I think I would explain it. I think I need to start another program here, don't I? We'll stay in Face Recognizer, and then we are going to create a new file, and we are going to call that new file Face Recognizer, and this will be 10, and we will call this thread.py. Okay, fresh, new, spanking new, clean, no errors yet. And what we are going to learn is, we are going to learn how to do a little threading. And threading is, I define functions just like I did before. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to run the functions at the same time. But defining the functions is the same as it was before. And so to illustrate this, imagine that I have a big box, and I want a function that opens the big box, waits 5 seconds, closes the big box. Then I want a small box, and that small box I want to open, close, open, close, open, close. Now the problem is I want them to both be operating independently, but the problem is if I call function 1, it goes open, waits 5 seconds, closes. Well, what happens during that 5-second wait? Box small is stuck because everything stops at that time.sleep or at that wait. Okay, so you see what happens is big box open, big box close, then little box open, close, open, close, open, close, then big box opens, big box close, open, close, open, close, open, close. You see the smaller one I'm opening and closing faster. But what I want is while this is going on, I want this to keep going on. This is really hard to do, make your hands go at different areas. But you see one box is opening and closing fast and the other box is opening and closing slow. If you don't believe that, go away and try to make that work with functions, okay? Or try to make that work with what we know now. You just can't do it, okay? So this is the way we're going to do it. First of all, this is called threading. So we're going to need to import a library. Okay, so we are going to say from the library threading, I want to import something called thread. Okay, and we'll use that in a minute. Also, we need to do delays and sleep, so we're going to import time. And now, what I want to do is I want to define a function. It's not inside of a class, so it's not a method. I'm going to define a function called big box. Okay, and what I want that big box function to do is just sit and open and close the box. So I want it to keep doing it, so I'm just going to say while true. What am I going to do when it's true, true? True is always true, so this is an infinite loop. I'm going to say print. Okay, imagine this is big box is open. Now imagine you had a function that's actually opening the box, but I'm just going to print big box is open. Now I want it to say open how long? 5 seconds. So I'm going to say time.sleep. Okay, I want to sleep. How long do I want to leave the box open? 5 seconds. Now after that, what do I want to do? I want to close the box. Big box is closed. Now after I close it, how long do I want to leave it closed? 5 seconds. Okay. Now, what do I also want to define? I want to define small box. And notice this is just a function. This is not a class. This is just a function. Small box. What do I want to do with small box? What is that? Okay, that looks good. Print. Small box is open. And then how long do I want to leave it open? I forgot the while true. Same thing I need to, that's what was messing me up. I want to keep doing this, and then I will need to tab that over. I will need to tab that over and tab that over. And then what do I want to do? Time.sleep. So I'm going to leave the small box open for 1 second, and then I'm going to print small box is closed, and then I want to time.sleep. Okay. And I want to sleep for 1. So the big box is going to open for 5 seconds, close for 5 seconds, open for 5 seconds, close for 5 seconds, and the small box is going to open and close every second. Okay, now what you can see is just what I could do is I could come down here and I could just say, what could I do? I could just say call big box. Doesn't need any parameters, so I could just go like call the function big box. When it sees big box, it's going to run up here, and then what's it going to do? Okay. What is this? Import time. Do I really not know how to import time? This is very purple. I was sure that's how you did it. It's line 14 that it does. Oh, okay. Man, that was driving me crazy. I didn't close my parentheses, and it wasn't an error here. It was an error there, and then I have an extra parentheses there. Scared me a second. Okay. So, let's see. Big box, I called it, and then it is not showing anything. Why? Oh, okay, never mind. I had it indented, and so big box was part of small box. That scared me pretty bad there. Sometimes you think you actually don't know what you're doing. Okay, big box is open. Okay, big box is closed, big box is open. Okay, now if I just wanted to do small box, all right, let's kill this with the little trash icon there. I didn't give this a neat way to exit, so we just crash it. So then I'm going to call small box like that. And now if I call small box, what is the problem that's going to happen? Well, when I go up to big box, it just sort of stays there, and so I never come back to start small box. You see, so it's kind of like I made an infinite loop, so once I go in that function, I can't go in the other function. And if I try to do it down here with the weights, I can't be opening and closing the small box fast as the big box is opening slow. So you see, you just kind of get stuck. So what we need to do is we need to create a thread. Okay, so I'm going to create a thread, which is big box thread. And I need to use the function that I imported, thread. I'm going to create a thread, and then I need to send it what the target function is. My target function is big box. And now if I had arguments, I would put comma, the arguments, but I don't have any arguments, so I'm going to leave that blank. Okay. And then I'm going to create a second box called small box thread, and it's equal to thread. And then what is the target? The target is equal to the function small box. Okay, and then the args. All right, the arguments. Again, I don't have any arguments. All right, so now this is creating a thread that is going to run big box. It's creating a thread that's going to run small box. Now there's something that just, if I understand right, it makes it like you go off and launch these threads and you could kill the program and that thread could keep running, and you're sitting there trying to do things with unexpected results because you have old threads running. And if I understand correct, you need to do like a big box thread.daemon is equal to true, and I think that just locks things together, so if you kill the program, it kills the threads. Okay, and if I don't completely understand that right, let me know. Small box thread dot daemon equal true. So that should basically keep those two threads behaving nicely. And now I've created the threads. What do I need to do? I need to run them, so I can say big box thread dot start. Okay, and then I need to do small box thread dot start. So I define the function, I create the thread, and now I'm starting the thread. Okay, now this is the problem. If I just ended the program here, it would launch the big box thread, it would launch the small box thread, and then it gets to the end of the program and the program would stop, and then what would happen? The threads would stop. So I got to give the main I got to give the main program something to do, so I'll just say while true and then just pass. So it's just going to sit here and loop, and that's going to keep the threads alive. All right, so let's look at this and see how many mistakes I made. Okay, there's the first one. Big box comma arg. What is wrong with that? Args, arguments, s, args, okay. Run Python file in terminal. Does it still not like it? What is this business? Okay, so I've got big box thread is equal to thread, and then target is equal to big box. Okay, maybe what I need to do here is like this and like that, because that is a better way to call things. Still does not like that. What did I do wrong here? Let me just take this args out for right now because we don't have any arguments, and maybe it does not like that. Although I think it really should. No, this does not. I'm setting up a target. I am not putting those in there like that. I spelled that right. I need to close that. Maybe I'd not closed all those things up right. Let's try that. Small box is not defined. Well, at least that's something. Uppercase S. Right. Uppercase S, because that was an uppercase S. Now let's try it. Okay. All right, so now I want to go back. Those args, that should work. I had some typo. I wasn't seeing args like that. To pass the arguments inside that, comma, args to pass the arguments. I think maybe I'd not kept good track of my parentheses. Now let's try it. It's, why does it not like just comma a r args args? I was sure that I had done this earlier without passing it any arguments. Okay, let's leave that out for now. Wonder if it just, darn it. All right, it does not like that in there blank for some reason. Okay, let's try this again like this, the simple way. Okay, so what I want you to see is it opened the big box, then small box is open, closed, then it closed the big box, and now the small box is open, close, open, close. But you see the small box is opening and closing quickly as the big box is opening and closing quicker. I am going to come over, and pardon me, but I'm going to come over to a different program, which I believe I had in a different folder. I'd done this earlier, and I can't figure out why that is not working. I called it Python Learning, and I called it Simple Thread. And let's do this. Okay, why does this work over here? What did I do differently? Oh, it's an equal. I think I left out my... Did I leave out my equal sign? Did I leave out my equal sign? Man, that would be terrible. Now let's see here. I can close this up. Simple thread. Let's kill that. Okay, here we are. Okay, here we are. So, real-time learning here. ARGS equal like that. And then, comma, ARGS equal like that. I think I'd left out my equal sign. I hope this works now. It still doesn't like it. Man, I'm just crashing and burning today. Target is big box. Oh, I forgot my parenthesis. All right, let's run it now. This is going to drive me. There is an extra parenthesis. I am going crazy with parentheses in the wrong spot. Okay, this is going to run this time. Okay, big box is open, small box open, closed, open, closed, open, closed. Big box closes, small box open, close, open, close, open, close. Okay, so even though this is a real simple program and a real simple concept, what I want you to see is it solves huge problems. Okay, so let's review. Okay, I define a function, big box. I define a function, small box. I create a thread based on that function. I create another thread based on the other function. I tell those threads to behave nicely, to play nicely together, and then I start the two threads. Okay, and then they sit and operate independently. And then when I kill the program, then both of the threads stop. Very good. All right. Let me just do this time, let me pass it an argument like red, and let me pass it an argument blue. Okay, and then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say that I'm going to have a color and then color. So what I'm doing is I'm passing it a parameter to show you how you can pass a parameter in here. And so this time I'm going to say here color, comma, box is open. And then I'm going to say color, box is open. And then same thing here. Color, box is open. And then same thing here. Color. And I think I forgot some commas up here. Like that. Okay. So you see what I'm doing is now I'm passing it a parameter of red and blue. And then hopefully that will grab in up here, and then let's see if this works. Color, oh, got a extra quote there. All right, let's see. Doesn't like takes one positional argument, but 3 were given. Okay, so let's see. I think maybe, let's say C is equal to red, and then let me pass it C, and then C is equal to, I'm sure I can pass a string, blue, and then I pass it C. Let's see if that works. Still doesn't like it. Okay, so this args thing is not working the way that I think it should. Okay, okay, I see. I think it needs that comma on the list of arguments. Let's see if I take that comma out. Yeah, it doesn't like it without the comma. So when you have the arguments, you've got to put a comma afterwards. And now let's try it. Okay, red box is open. Blue box is open, blue closed, red. Okay, so you see that's how you pass the arguments, but for some reason it appears that you need a trailing comma when you do that. All right, but when I put the trailing comma in, then it works. And that just, I'm just going to make sure that that's actually it. If I take that trailing comma out, it doesn't like it. If I put the trailing comma in, it likes it. Okay, let's see if I could pass it. What could I pass it? C and X and C and X, and then say X equal 5 and say X equal 4, and then I'm passing it C and X, and then I can come up here and I say color comma of length comma L, and I got to put the L here, comma L. I'm going to pass it in. I got to put it here, comma L. So I'm trying to pass it 2 parameters just to make sure that we understand this. Passing it 2 and then doing something with it of length comma L of length comma L closed of length comma L. Okay, so I'm seeing, can I pass it 2 parameters, and it probably still wants the trailing comma, I would guess. So let's see. Run Python file in terminal. Okay, length 5, length 4, 4, 4. Yeah, so it's passing those 2 in. And just to see, do you always have to put that trailing comma? Run Python file in terminal. I guess if I have 2 parameters, I don't have to use a trailing comma. So do not understand exactly how this args work, but if you only pass it 1 parameter, put the comma. The trailing comma, if you are not going to do that and you have 2 parameters, you can just pass it the 2 parameters without a trailing comma. That is like the darndest thing I've ever seen. I'll have to look into that. You guys look into it and tell me how it's working. Tell me why it's working that way. Okay, so we have learned functions, we've learned methods, we've learned classes, and we've learned threading. And what you can see is the real power is if you start doing the threading inside of a class. Hint, hint, that's where we're going. Okay, so let's see what our assignment is for next week. This was our simple old way of doing things, trying to run 2 programs. Okay. Run 2 cameras, and when I run 2 cameras, that happens. Okay, do you see how I have that delay? Well, what I want you to do is I want you to use what you learned today about classes and threading, and what I want you to do is get something that operates like this. with a little luck. Okay, you notice I have 2 cameras. 1. Look at that. Boom. All right. So your homework for next week is to use classes, methods, and threading to get your 2 cameras working in sync. Okay, I hope this was a little bit of a painful lesson. I had a couple of typos getting started, but the reason I don't go back and just completely edit those things out is everybody's going to make mistakes programming, and I want you to see how to kind of debug it and how to troubleshoot it. The real thing that got me is, and I don't understand why if you just pass it one argument, why it wants a comma at the end of it. But anyway, if we put the comma at the end of it, it does work. All right, you guys leave me a comment down below. Did this lesson make sense? Have you guys run into all that knit stuff before and self stuff and not understood it? Hopefully you'll understand it now. And I am telling you, we have got some super exciting lessons that are coming up, because as we can start running these things using classes and threading, there is just a whole lot of exciting stuff we can do. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this lesson. If you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, go ahead and subscribe and get ready for some exciting new lessons coming down the pike. This is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.